Hello, I'm Jelaine Chubb, State Archivist at the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. Welcome to this discussion of the Texas Supreme Court Records, a preservation and access partnership. In January 2012, members of the Texas Historical Foundation toured the newly remodeled Lorenzo de Zavala State Archives and Library building and learned about our efforts to preserve and provide access to some of the earliest and most important legal records in the state, the Texas Supreme Court records, which date from the 1840s. During this tour, board member Marshall Doak asked how the foundation could support our efforts to make these records available for research by Texas scholars. Shortly thereafter, TSLAC received the first of 4 grants from the foundation. The $5,000 grant from the Texas Historical Foundation's Marshall Doak Jr. Texas Legal History Preservation Fund enabled the agency to hire a part-time intern from the University of Texas School of Information to help assist our archivists with some very labor-intensive preservation work necessary to make these records fit for both use by researchers in the archives and for digitization. Tiffany Criswell, archivist, was one of those interns, and she is now a highly skilled member of our staff and an expert on the early Supreme Court records. She will shortly provide a more detailed information about our preservation and digitization efforts. Tanya Wood, Senior Reference Archivist, will explain how researchers can access these resources in the archives and remotely from anywhere in Texas or around the world. Richard Gilrith, Reference Archivist, will follow up and provide a preview of the most recent project we've undertaken with the Foundation's support. Transcription of some of our records from the Texas Third Court of Appeals. I'd like to invite Tiffany to come on and talk about the Supreme Court records.
Hi, I'm Tiffany. I'm happy to speak with you today. TSLAC has the records of the Supreme Court dating from 1840 to 2004. The oldest case files are the M case files, dating from 1840 to 1892. These records are from the Circuit Court era. During these years, Supreme Court judges held Supreme Court proceedings in 3 different locations: Galveston, Austin, and Tyler. The court staff would rotate among these 3 locations in a circuit, and the 3 different court locations resulted in 3 different numbering systems. In the 1940s, court staff assigned one numbering system to these records, the M case numbers. The M case files are the first case files being processed with the Texas Historical Foundation grants due to their age and condition. Here we have some examples of M numbers, often stamped on the front or the back page of the case file. We use this numbering system assigned in the 40s to organize these records, since it's the only long-term consistent numbering system that we have. You can see up at the top, though, that we do have old numbers written on the case files, and you can search the case files using those numbers as well. These case files are tri-folded and often quite brittle from years of storage in tightly packed boxes. These case files, of course, predate any kind of climate control, so they've been exposed to every kind of weather that Texas has. Case files have been stored this way for so long they are resistant to being flat. Patrons must use weights to hold case files open, and even then, the case files are often bound by ribbons and metal pieces that make text difficult to see. Preservation steps must be taken to get the documents accessible and ready to digitize. We start by treating the documents. This includes disbinding, humidification, flattening, and conservation. We then transcribe and analyze data from the case files And after we have that data, we're ready to digitize the documents for online access. Documents are bound with ribbons and metal pieces, which must be removed before humidification and flattening. Supplementary documents like briefs, motions, and opinions are typically rolled inside the transcript. These supplementary documents are often the most tightly rolled and require the most attention. Here, Texas Historical Foundation grant recipient Stephanie is preparing documents for humidification. Case files are taken apart and arranged in an accordion fashion in a crate for stability. These case files are suspended over a container of water inside a plastic bin for about a week to relax the folds in the paper. After the paper is softened, case files are pressed between layers of blotter paper and boards and secured tightly in our book press. In the middle photo, we have another grant recipient, Kate, pressing these case files. These case files are typically pressed for 1 month for the best results. On the right, we have a stack of newly flattened case files. The humidification and flattening process tends to take 5 weeks and is highly effective in getting these documents ready for access. Conservation treatment includes removing the mud daubers, moths, spiders, and other pests that have made the records home over the years. Some records are also covered with dirt, soot, or mold residue that has to be removed before we can consider the case files preserved. Some case files are bound with animal hoof glue. If court clerks did not use ribbons or metal bindings, they probably used glue. Adhesive was applied quickly, sometimes dripping down into the interiors of the case files. This adhesive must be dissolved with methyl cellulose so the text can be fully exposed. We paint the animal-based adhesive over with methyl cellulose and use mylar strips to keep these portions of the documents moist until the adhesive softens enough for the pages to be separated. This tends to make the pages wavy, so they have to be humidified and flattened a second time. After these steps, we have nicely flattened case files that we can house in labeled folders for easy access, and we're ready to analyze the documents. Case files must be read to make note of defendants, plaintiffs, judges, dates, causes of action, and so on. Often this data collection involves some skilled handwriting analysis. A double S in this era was often written the German way as a PH. Some items are easy to read, like the one pictured on the right, but others involve hunting for context clues, like the one pictured on the bottom left. Once data has been entered for all of our required fields, the records are ready for digitization. The data we collect is entered into our custom database. This information is linked to digital images once the records are scanned in our digitization lab. I'm pictured here working on our database, which I'll show you a little detail of now. So not all of the case files pictured are in the Texas Digital Archive, but they're all ready to go in as soon as we have images to pair with the data. This database is also interesting because the case files date back into the Republic era, and it gives you a snapshot of what life was like in early Texas. In this case, for example, it just looks like a straightforward debt and estate case, but if you scroll over, you see that this case deals with the estate of Stephen F. Austin. If you scroll down a little bit more, here we have a case involving Jacob de Cordova, just a simple property case on paper, but Jacob de Cordova was one of the city planners for the city of Waco. After we have our data ready to go, legal size case files are digitized using our copybook. Oversized items, such as maps used for case exhibits, are digitized on our digibook. Both stations hold documents in place under a glass plate while an overhead camera creates the images. Our digital asset coordinator, Stephen Cantner, does quality control for all of our court cases and matches the images to the data collected so they can be packaged to enter into the Texas Digital Archive. Up next, we have reference archivist Tanya Wood, who will tell you more about how these records are used and accessed.
Thank you, Tiffany. I'll give an overview of how this project has improved access to the Supreme Court M case files, and later talk about how to access other appellate court records that TSLAC holds. To make the digitized Supreme Court M case files available online, we added the files to the Texas Digital Archive, or TDA. The TDA manages, preserves, and provides access to TSLAC's electronic records collections. You may be wondering how you can take a closer look at the project results or search for a specific case file. The link at the bottom of this slide is a great starting point. It will take you to this page that includes information about the three groups of digitized Supreme Court records: the case files, the indexes and registers, and the dockets, and also includes links to the digital images and to the finding aid that describes the Supreme Court records that we hold. Clicking on the case file link will take you to this section. No need to try and read the small print here. This is just to give you an idea of what the web page looks like. You can see the link to access a custom search page, plus a note that cases are being added regularly. And if you don't find what you're looking for, you can always email us for further assistance. Clicking on the link to access the customized search page takes you here. So when Supreme Court cases were first added to the TDA, we had developed a search tips page to instruct users on how to find a specific case. As more cases were added, we knew that we needed an easier and faster way to direct researchers to the materials they wanted. The database that Tiffany was using to add case details to had the information that also would help researchers. So State Archive staff worked together to develop this Supreme Court custom search page. The fields in the custom search let you filter the search results. For example, you can search by the last name of a party or an attorney's name. You can also search by the year filed, the county of origin, or the case file numbers, either the original number that you might find on a published opinion or the M number that was assigned by court staff. The filtered results will be shown in the table below the search fields, and you can see the first line of the table at the bottom of the slide. Please note that the keyword search option doesn't filter the results on this page, but lets you search and takes you to those results in the TDA. The benefit to using this search is that it goes across all the fields in the database, including the notes and case summary fields that are not represented in the custom search page. So if you're searching for cases relating to Stephen F. Austin, as Tiffany pointed out on the database, and he wasn't a party or the judge or a lawyer, you would want to use the keyword search to find this case file. So once you enter your search term in the keyword field, you would click Show Results in the TDA, which is a button at the bottom of this web page. And then the results would appear on the TDA. Please note that only digitized cases are included in these search results. For cases that are not yet digitized, you'll want to search the card index or the dockets, and then contact our reference staff for access options. I'd like to share a couple of examples of how remote researchers are using the digitized Supreme Court case files. One of the presenters at a session at the Texas State Historical Association annual meeting this past spring, which concerned women of color and family in the 19th century Texas courts, noted the effect that the pandemic had on his research plans. He said he completed only 2 case studies of many more that he had identified. And one of the 2 case studies drew on this digitized Supreme Court case file, M1617, Rebecca Haggerty versus Cephas Andrews, James Hughes et al. A search of the last name Haggerty in the parties field of the custom search page brings up this case in the table shown here on the screen. The case concerns a Creek Scottish woman named Rebecca Haggerty. This page from the case file gives some background about her marriage, divorce proceedings, and her husband's death. So while she was in the midst of divorce from her second husband, he died. She already owned property and had children from her first marriage. Her second husband did not think that their son was his, and so only provided a small amount of money for his education in his will. Haggerty contested the will on her son's behalf. The presenter was able to use the case file here in context with other records at TSLAC and elsewhere to understand how Haggerty was able to take this case to the Supreme Court and win. Another remote researcher, a graduate student on the East Coast, has been regularly accessing the digitized dockets, card index to the M cases, and case files on the TDA. She also checks the missing list on our website to determine if a case no longer exists or if we might have it, and then requests copies that have not yet been digitized as she continues to research and identify cases concerning the topic of her dissertation. In addition to the 2 examples I provided of how researchers are using the online MCase files, I would also like to share some numbers about how often these items are used. As you can see, access to Supreme Court MCase files on the TDA has increased each year. The chart on the left shows how many times MCase files were accessed on the TDA for calendar years beginning with 2018, with just over 2,500 page views in 2020. If the current rate continues, we can expect more than 4,000 views for this calendar year. Part of the increase in use may be due to the rollout and recent improvement of the custom search page. The number of times the custom search page has been used is noted at the bottom of this slide. And as a comparison, the table on the right shows how often paper MCase files were used during roughly the same time period. Although the number is much lower than on the TDA, with only 44 uses in fiscal year 2020, we can also see an increase in use each year. And this may be due in part to the improved access to the dockets and card file index that allow researchers to identify a case file exists. So what we've done since 2012 is preserved 8,000 MCase files and digitized 2,500 MCase files. And what we still have to do is preserve 6,600 more MCases and digitize 12,000. And of course, continue our conservation work on those files. So the Texas Historical Foundation contributions have been invaluable to getting these records accessible to researchers. So while we've done quite a bit with the Supreme Court records and have a great project and process in place now, we do have much more to do and many other appellate court records that need to be made accessible. So we do have case files for many other Texas appellate courts. The list on the slide is for the records held here in Austin. The extent of records and ease of locating case files and providing access varies for each court. For example, we only hold 10 years worth of case files for the Fifth Court of Appeals, and the finding aid contains a file level inventory listing the style of the case, making it very easy for researchers to locate a specific file. At the other extreme, we hold 90 years of case files for the Fourth Court, but no indexes, requiring researchers to contact the court or check published opinions in order to locate a file number. Access to Third Court of Appeals case files falls somewhere in between these two extremes. Travis County, where Austin is located, has been within the jurisdiction of the Third Court of Appeals since its creation. And as such, this court hears appeals for cases that have statewide significance, including ones that challenge state laws, the Constitution, or when the state or its agencies are sued. And so these case files are an important resource for the history of Texas state government. However, only 7 cases have been requested within the last 3 fiscal years, and that may be due in large part to the difficulty in identifying cases heard by this court. The box inventory for these oldest cases, dating 1892 to 1962, only lists the case number, as you can see from this excerpt from the finding aid on the right of the screen. For cases dating up to 1962, there are 3 ways to locate a case file. Indexes dating 1892 to 1922, dockets dating 1892 to 1959, which are only helpful if you know the date a case was filed, and then published opinions, which do not consistently list the case number. The 2 indexes to the Third Court case files are handwritten and are not completely alphabetical. Within each letter of the alphabet, there are separate lists for appellant and appellee. Names are then listed in separate sections by first vowel and then by case number. It takes time to search for a name, and the researchers already need to have done quite a bit of legwork to determine that there's even a Third Court of Appeals case file that is of interest. A searchable index available online would greatly improve access to these Third Court of Appeals case files. I'm going to turn it over to reference archivist Richard Gilruth now to talk about how the Texas Historical Foundation's continued support will allow us to create an online searchable index to these case files using a crowdsourcing application that we are testing.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm going to discuss From the Page, a service that lets volunteers transcribe archival documents. TSLAC is working with several state archives to improve From the Page, and From the Page is operated by a local business here in Austin, Texas. From the Page is a web-based transcription tool which lets members of the public transcribe copies of archival documents. It works within a web browser and it doesn't require the installation of any software on a volunteer's computer. Volunteers will be able to find a document written in cursive and start transcribing it right away. We will use the Third Court of Appeals indexes that we discussed earlier as a pilot project for From the Page. We hope to complete transcription of the indexes within 1 year. To meet this goal, we are hiring 1 or 2 part-time positions. These individuals will use From the Page as collaborators with access to a private collection, which means only they would have access to that collection. They will follow transcription instructions that are being prepared by TSLAC staff. Quality control will also be done by TSLAC staff. This will include a careful read-through to ensure the accuracy of the transcribed material. Additionally, full-time staff will be available to answer questions and provide direction as needed. We tested From the Page with the Department of Criminal Justice escape record. You can see the web page where the transcriptions are done here. A scan of the original ledger is side by side with the fields that a volunteer would enter transcriptions into. Many volunteers use the From the Page already, which means that we would have a pool of people who can transcribe documents and have the necessary skill sets as well as the tools to learn more. From the Page includes documentation to help people read cursive handwriting and understand the rules of transcription. We're also developing our own rules and guidelines for transcribers based on the testing that we did. After the material is transcribed, it can be reviewed on From the Page using the same web page that allows a volunteer to transcribe the material. Other members of the public or TSLAC staff can review transcriptions and make any necessary edits. You can see a transcribed document on From the Page in this first image. Once a document is transcribed and reviewed, TSLAC staff can take the raw data to make it widely available. This second image shows a spreadsheet of raw data that our staff would use. Transcribed material can be added to the Texas Digital Archive. The next image shows the homepage of the TDA, which will have many of the digitized collections that are being transcribed. The public will eventually be able to see the original document and the transcribed materials through the TDA. Members of the public can then discover the transcribed materials in the same way that they're already finding items in the TDA. Reference staff have created many tutorials and guides to finding material in the TDA, which will make it easier for researchers to find the transcriptions. This pilot project will inform how we develop future transcription projects. We can apply the lessons learned to refine the transcription instructions and processes. We can also develop quality control procedures based on this project. Using the knowledge gained from this pilot project, we expect to develop additional ideas for crowdsourced transcription in the future. And next, I'm going to turn it back over to Jelaine for some final thoughts.
Thank you, Richard, Tanya, and Tiffany for that presentation. On behalf of the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, we hope you have enjoyed this discussion of this highly successful preservation partnership between TSLAC and the Texas Historical Foundation. Together, we are making records available to the public and ensuring their continued preservation for generations to come. I would be remiss if I close this presentation without once again recognizing the support and continued encouragement of these efforts by THF member emeritus Marshall Doak and also its executive director Jean Crane. Thank you to both of you, and thank you to the board members of the Texas Historical Foundation for their support. On behalf of the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, I thank you for watching and keep looking to see what other wonderful things we're being able to do to preserve and provide access to Texas history. Thank you.